The Invisible Man is one of the most impressive and innovative movies of this decade. Aside from boasting probably the quickest broken promise in film history,
he's not out there. I promise.
Its villain, a vindictive tech genius and food waster named Adrian, torments our protagonist Cecilia, or C, in a manner indistinguishable from a supernatural evil. Why? Because she left him. Adrian, you may be invisible, but you can't hide from the carefully targeted bucket of suspiciously unlabeled but probably non-toxic paint that is our villain rating system, which goes as follows. In 3 different categories, I'll give the villain a score out of 100. How smart they are, how evil they are, and how iconic, and average them into an overall villain rating. Let's be clear. Just because a movie says someone is clever, it doesn't mean they are. What matters, at least for this Mastermind rating, is how they act. With this in mind, let's look at Adrian, a man who invents invisibility whose real genius apparently is getting into people's heads. Just like Einstein's real genius wasn't inventing relativity, but his work on the gravel sorter at the Swiss Patent Office. Adrian gets off to a rough start in living up to this intelligence. Despite him supposedly having complete control over C, she seems to have full access to his invisibility lab and surveillance system, with her escape further helped by a security wall with some of the best footholds a burglar could hope for. Then, after punishing C in ways we'll get into later, culminating in him murdering her sister and framing her for it, Adrian finds out C's pregnant and wants her back. He sends his brother in to offer her exoneration as long as she returns to him, but considering the harm he'd done, did he really expect she'd agree to this? Of course she doesn't, but that's where his new plan comes in. Following a violent killing spree during which C escapes custody, he makes sure to leave one guard to witness his conveniently half-broken invisibility suit so C would be seen as innocent, then tells her who he's going to kill so she knows where to be. Then, sending his brother in to his likely capture or death, imprisons himself in his house as if he was a victim and his brother had been the Invisible Man all along. It's a quite brilliant idea, and one with surprisingly few holes in it, much like Adrian's suit itself, which looks about as uncomfortable an experience of invisibility as wearing the one ring on a bad come-down. It almost works, and I doubt even there was anything more he could have done, but the trouble is C knows him too well to be fooled. At the end she goes to him wearing the, if it keeps working in every movie, don't fix it, hidden wire. Which if he'd fallen for might have been bad news for his Mastermind rating, but since he seemed to have no plans of confessing, I'll let him off on this. Unfortunately, Adrian is undone in another way, as C uses her own invisibility suit to make him cut his own throat. How did she get it? Well, earlier in the movie she'd gone back to his house, which again was completely accessible, and guessed the code to his invisibility chamber, managing to stow away a suit for herself for that very moment. Once again, Adrian is punished for his lax security, using a date for a code, which as many of you may know narrows down the possible range of numbers significantly. Any of you out there with dates as codes, you should assume whatever it was protecting has already been infiltrated. But back to Adrian. Not only does he use a date, but the date he and C met, something easily guessable. You could put this blunder down to his obsession with her, but it's still a blunder all the same. With all this in mind, let's give The Invisible Man his first rating. Yes, Adrian certainly lives up to his ability to get into people's heads, but it's C who gets into his head in the end, and he never sees his death coming. So now we know how clever the Invisible Man is, but how evil is he? How does he rank against the vilest of movie history? Let's find out with... They say a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, or in the case of Adrian's revenge, one burnt breakfast. It seems after faking his death, Adrian at first is content to put doubt in C's mind, little things to make her think he's haunting her. At night, perhaps inspired by a lonely double horror watchathon of Paranormal Activity and the Babadook, his antics begin to turn into torment. Then, as he spoils her job prospects and ruins her relationship with her sister, it becomes a crusade to destroy her life. What really takes it to the next level is when he hits James's young daughter Sydney, making it look like C did it, showing he's all willing to inflict harm on people who never wronged him in order to get at C. On the other hand, if he hadn't done something, he would have faced the true horror of having to sit quietly through an entire girls' night in.
Girls' night.
And then comes the final punishment. Cue another failed assurance from the incredibly unreliable men in this movie.
My name is Taylor and I will be taking care of you this evening.
As Adrian kills C's sister Emily right in front of her, even doing so in a way Emily sees he's real, silencing the only person who didn't think C was crazy. So C winds up in a mental institution charged with murder, her sister dead, her friendships lost, and to add insult to injury, Adrian's brother informs her the money given to her in his will be cut off, taking away her last good thing of paying for Sydney's college education. And let's remind ourselves, all of this Adrian does because she left him. Talk about disproportionate responses, it's right up there with the big ones.
Is that all right?
What's the fucking matter with you? What is the fucking matter with you? What are you, stupid or what?
So what is Adrian's saving grace? It may be small, but I'd say at least he has the paternal instinct to care about his baby when all other human life, including his own siblings, seems meaningless to him. In a movie world where fathers abandon their children more often than Daniel Day-Lewis's blacklisted email folder fills up with items titled script, such dedication isn't to be taken for granted. I think it's about time to give Adrian his second rating. Will he plunge deep into the pit of motion picture repugnance, or fall flat like a flimsy flirting attempt?
So any reason you worked in Paris in particular? Is that where all the beautiful women in the world have to go as a rule?
If there's one action that sums Adrian up, it's his not even bothering to find a home for his dog Zeus in his will. This is a man who cares only for himself, and if he does treat you with anything like kindness, it's only for his benefit.
I would burn everything I own just to prove that to you.
Now at last we approach the category that separates the invisible from the merely elusive. For to be a truly iconic villain, it takes more than just bad blood and a master plan. Let's find out where Adrian stands with... The power of invisibility is hardly new, going back as far in movie history as special effects could manage it, attained through a dangerous potion, or more commonly manifesting nowadays as a superpower or device to spy in otherwise inaccessible plot conversations. With this invisible man though, we have invisibility achieved through scientific means, giving a realistic edge over its predecessors. Because let's be honest, becoming invisible by swallowing a drug makes about as much scientific sense as spinach making Popeye strong, or water making Zuckerberg human. As director Leigh Whannell said, I wanted the audience to buy into it, like it could happen tomorrow. And because of this decision, Adrian becomes not some make-believe evildoer, but a disturbing glimpse into what a cruel-intentioned person could achieve with technology perhaps just on the horizon. Being an invisible villain though has a downside, especially one who so rarely shows himself, and indeed for half the movie is presumed dead. It is possible to give an unforgettable performance with limited screen time, but in Adrian's case, his best work is done when no one can see him. In his only significant appearance, he's jittery, unconvincing and transparently vicious, far from the genius manipulator we've been told he is. Oliver Jackson-Cohen does an excellent job at portraying Adrian in this state, but in choosing this direction, an opportunity is missed. Before Adrian and C's meeting, it's still not 100% certain whether it was actually Adrian's brother who committed all the Invisible Man's crimes, but when we see how Adrian acts, it's quite clear he's the guilty one. While this alleviates any possibility C makes a catastrophic mistake when she finally kills him and that justice was indeed done, it takes away from him as a character. Now, without further delay, or at least less than certain Uber drivers, let's give Adrian his final rating. Terrorising our protagonist with one of the most elaborate revenges seen on screen, without being on screen, Adrian I feel still falls short of the very best. So now we have our three ratings: Mastermind 82, Devilry 87, Notoriety 72, and combining them that gives an overall villain rating for Adrian Griffin of...
Surprise.
What do you think? Am I about right? Or should I be locked in a bright room wearing a crotch-torn invisibility suit with a pepper spray on Sydney and an angry Zeus? If you can't decide, here's what Oliver Jackson-Cohen said when I showed him my rating.
Oh, cool.
So until next time, and just some advice, if you ever find yourself part of a SWAT team, don't be the one guy who forgets his helmet. The only thing more brilliant than inventing something that makes you subscribe is not inventing it, but making us think you do.